Hey, it's Mike in New York. We're going to be doing a quick one-on-one interview with Woodside and Sunnyside and most of District 26's side, uh, Marvin Jeffcoat, and a conversation with him about the recent Supreme Court rulings on carry laws in existence in New York City, the effects of the new rulings, and also on religious liberty. I'm Mike in New York. Here's Marvin Jeffcoat.
Marvin, I know this decision of the Supreme Court is something that has resounded strongly with gun owners here in New York City. First of all, as a legal gun owner in New York City, what does this mean to you directly?
Well, it means that there's hope that they're eventually going to honor my rights, and I'll tell you why I put it that way. The Supreme Court, in its ruling, they applied rational basis instead of strict scrutiny, meaning that the plaintiff, we the people, must prove that the government's requirement for a pistol license has no rational basis related to any legitimate government interest. In my opinion, Second Amendment is a fundamental right requiring strict scrutiny be applied, where the government is required to prove a compelling government interest is present, and the requirement that they impose is the least restrictive means of accomplishing it is narrowly tailored to achieve it, so it has the least imposition on our rights. Imagine, if you will, someone that doesn't make a lot of money and they're in one of these crime-plagued neighborhoods that we have in our district, and they want to protect themselves. Well, they have to make a choice between feeding their family and obtaining a pistol. So I'm encouraged that they're recognizing our right to carry, but I'm also discouraged because of the reaction of the politicians. I mean, they said things like, only those who are fully qualified can obtain a carry license. People are going to be empowered to believe they can carry. The High Court's decision was not an immediate change in any laws. Now, how tone deaf can these tyrants be? SCOTUS affirmed our right to carry, and New York City's laws are bad laws. So they can drag their feet all they want, but when it goes back to Bruin is going to have to go back to the lower court, all right? And they're going to have to rule consistent with what Justice Thomas said. And they're going to have to throw out the current law. I wish they would put as much effort into securing our schools and keeping criminals off the street, but basically you have elected officials that have doubled down, and they're basically saying, we're not going to obey the court, and we're going to do everything we can using the resources of the people of New York State and New York City to fight the court. We're not going to obey the court. So my question to them is, to the tyrants, the Mayor Adams and Governor Hochul, if you don't respect the Supreme Court and you don't respect our rights, why should we respect you? Why should we listen to anything that comes out as law if the people that are, and she's not elected, by the way, but the people that are in office, if they don't obey what the Supreme Court says, when the Supreme Court comes up with some wacky stuff like they did many times in the past, and they've had to overturn it, liberals are all that, they're jumping up and down. So again, it's promising, but it's not an end all, because you still have tyrants that are not going to respect our right to carry. They feel that citizens have no right at all to carry, and they know the reason. See, the average citizen doesn't know why the Second Amendment was written. It wasn't written for hunting and fishing. It was written to give you, the citizen, parity with government. You got a big gun, I got a big gun. So when you knock on my door, you have a warrant, and you say respectfully, Mr. Jeffcoat, may I enter? Yes, please, like that. But they don't want that. So that's my initial take on it.
When you mentioned that on your Facebook page, I noticed you were reacting on your profile to some of the news articles, particularly in this case one reported by the Associated Press, that basically said, new provisions or new rights were granted. You disagreed with that. Could you explain that?
Correct. Yeah. Well, what the headline of the day was, the High Court extends gun rights. They didn't extend anything. They affirmed what's already there. We have an innate, God-given right to keep and bear arms, and Justice Thomas defined what to bear is. Keep is in your house, bear is on your person. I live in a very tough neighborhood. I live in a great neighborhood. I apologize. But I work in a very tough neighborhood, so I have to take a 10-minute subway walk to my office, and, I walk between two housing projects that have frequent gun battles.
Senior political analyst.
Disarmed by my government. So I have the right to bear arms in the street for my safety to get me to work, but they don't recognize that. So the court didn't extend anything. They clarified what these liberals can't seem to get through their thick skulls, is that every American has a right. Until they've done something wrong, they have a right to carry. And let me tell you something. The court's ruling is not going to imperil any citizen or any police officer, because law-abiding citizens, people like myself that take the time to go through this onerous infringement and get fingerprinted and pay the money so that they know I have a gun, we're not going to be the ones committing the crime, all right? Nobody is going to be hurt by my guns unless they're a threat to me or my family. Now, if you get people trying to J6 me, like knocking on my door at 03 in the morning saying, get out of here, and we're going to handcuff you and take you in front of your kids like they did this poor guy, or these two 76-year-old beautiful blonde-haired twin sisters, they did nothing wrong, and yet the FBI is harassing them. They show up to the house all turtled up in their safety gear and their vests with rifles and armored personnel carriers, which most civilians would think is a tank. I mean, that's pretty scary. They show up and do that. Then you have a problem, And why did they do that? They did that to these people to chill free speech, to chill anyone challenging and questioning what they think is their outright authority to rule your life no matter what. I mean, these people, the only crime that I can think of is that they were white. They support President Trump, and they were unfortunate enough to have a neighbor or their bank say, yes, that person was in the D.C. area on January 6th. If you're going to do stuff like that, then you got a problem with Marvin Jeffcoat. But you respect me, I respect you. And see, that's the thing. They don't respect us. And they don't think that we're adult enough to behave in a safe manner with a firearm. And we have to retrain our police. Police are taught that the only people who should have firearms is us. And we know that's not true, because the criminals get them, and they're going to get them no matter what we do for law-abiding citizens. So any rule or regulation, it only impedes or infringes on the rights of a law-abiding citizen. They didn't extend.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, I was going to say they didn't extend anything. They just affirmed what's already, enumerated in the Constitution. We have the right to bear arms in public. And he said, Manhattan is not a gun-free zone. You just can't do that. You can't say every bus, train, subway, or city block is a gun-free zone. You just cannot do that. That's overbroad and should be void for vagueness. You have to use common sense, and you have to trust adults to be adults.
Mm-hmm. So basically, when you look back at this case, the primary reason that media is saying was about a Gramercy Park murder suicide shooting that happened in 1911. When then State Senator Timothy Big Tim Sullivan, of Tammany Hall came out and came out with this edict, basically this law that restricted the use of firearms in New York City since 1911, which is primarily the basis for every other restrictive law that was passed in New York City. Is it true that this was the primary cause of it? We're looking at something that's 111 years old, which was the basis for this whole thing. When David Graham Phillips shot and killed someone in Gramercy Park, and therefore everybody has to suffer because one guy with a gun was upset about something else that someone else did, and that just led to the Sullivan Act, which is the primary reason for everybody not being able to defend themselves in New York City at times.
Right. The Sullivan Act, it disparages against low-income people. It takes away, because you can't afford armed security. But, there's a theory out there, and it's applicable now today. The theory goes that when the extortionists for Tammany Hall would go out to collect, they would come back to the political bosses and say, "Hey, boss, I can't collect the money you want me to collect because these people are all armed. You got to do something about that. I mean, my life's in danger." So what do? They come out with, they use a justification like what happened in Gramercy Park, and they're full of these justifications. They take one dangerous act and they make it seem like it occurs 99% of the time when it's less than 1%. So they use that to justify the evolution into the Sullivan Act, and it's basically to make it one-sided, to protect the organized criminals so that they have access to guns and the average citizen that's being shaken down by an extortionist doesn't. And if you fast forward to today, you look at the people making these stupid laws, gun laws that continue to confiscate our firearms, violate our Second Amendment rights, but also they come up with new, and it never put it past a liberal to come up with ingeniously bad ideas. And one of them is cashless bail. So now they're like, well, we still can't operate. You got to keep us on the street. So what do the politicians do? They're not representing you and I. They come up with cashless bail. They represent the criminals, and that's Stuart Cousin and them. And to his credit, Mayor Adams did go up to Albany and say, look, this can't go on because it's having an effect that is deleterious to everybody. Innocent people are getting killed because people are getting let back out on the street. So he did try to lobby against that up in Albany, and they told him basically go away, which was wrong. They have blood on their hands. And my theory for years has been that we need to take away bureaucratic, executive, and legislative immunity and hold these people accountable for the horrible laws they create. But, yeah, they represent the criminals. So it does go back to Sullivan, and there was definitely a motive behind it. It's always been for corrupt politicians to protect their criminal cronies. And we saw that with the riots that we had in 2020, the Summer of Love. They let all these people out that assaulted cops. And I believe in some instances cops were killed, innocent civilians were definitely killed, and these people were let go. They're free on the streets today. Meanwhile, you have some patriotic Americans are being held incommunicado without access to legal counsel, critical medications, and family members down in the D.C. swamp.
The thing that puzzles people is, okay, you got guys like Robert De Niro. He's got a pistol permit. Obviously he can afford it. And you've got, the idea that a woman, let's say any woman, both of us have sons, but if we had daughters, for example, they can't even carry mace to protect themselves legally, or a stun gun, or even a long stick, a cane to defend themselves, because they would be charged with assault, even if the other person had a gun or a knife. It's just the way New York City has designed it in such a way that they just want you to bend over and take it from these muggers and criminals.
Yeah, they create victims. I'm fortunate. On one side of my family, I got a brother that he lives in Florida, and my niece, beautiful blonde-haired girl, she's trained. She knows how to shoot, and she lives in a free state. So, she's still up in Vermont, but eventually she'll move down to Florida. And in Vermont, she can carry, but since she was a little girl, my brother taught her how to shoot. So I'm fortunate on that end. But I have a large family, and I have other nieces that they live in jurisdictions that are not so free, and I worry, because with these gun laws, all they do is create victims. And politicians come out and they say things like after the ruling, we're not going to have the Wild Wild West. Well, we already have the Wild Wild West, and I just described that. If you look at Brownsville, East New York, where I'm forced to work, there was a cop that was recently shot, and that was an ambush. They're not telling you that, but if you look at what they said in the papers, cops sitting in their car, and all of a sudden they hear shots, and I don't know if a ricochet tore into his arm or if it was glass. They have the ballistic glass now. He should have been protected, but thankfully it looks like this guy is going to be okay. But this is a common occurrence in that neighborhood, and I've witnessed it firsthand when I had that particular building in the past. Gun battles where the police didn't return fire, and that's the other thing. These kids can't shoot, so they're liable to hit anything. So you have the Wild Wild West now, and it's a total infringement, and it's made folks less safe. I'm lucky that one niece is in a jurisdiction where she can protect herself, but I have several others, and I do worry because all they do with their stupid laws is create more victims. We need a plan, and the plan is not to take guns from law-abiding citizens.
Eric Adams yesterday said something that I put in another episode on this podcast, just to give him his side of it. He said, we're not going to go back from the gains we've made. We're not going to, we're not going to let the city be more unsafe. Unsafe for who? What gains? The gains in the murder rate and crime rate is through the roof. It just makes you wonder what some of these people at City Hall are thinking, because they can't seem to understand that things are actually much worse off right now with all these gun laws than with people able to defend themselves.
Well, I think it's very telling what he said, and they know that the average citizen is less safe than they were when you had like Commissioner Kelly. Commissioner Kelly, he had a plan. NYPD was allowed to saturate areas where they knew thugs were carrying guns. And until we refund NYPD, gun violence and all crimes are going to escalate. We need to go back to the foresight and the expertise that we had. And we lost valuable intelligence. They're going to have to go back into these areas and gain that intelligence the hard way. So there's going to be violent confrontation among police and bad guys. But hopefully that will protect the innocent. But if you look at his statement, we're not going to give up. Who are they protecting? You have the political elites like Adams, these elected officials, people in the city council, and like you say, Robert De Niro, a guy that can get a gun. Now, if there ever was a guy that exhibited a lack of balance publicly, I would say it's him. I mean, the guy's had public meltdowns, and he gets to carry, and I don't. I mean, I'm trained. I know what I'm shooting at, and I know when not to shoot. I know what to look at. I mean, I'm going to look for someone's hands as a threat, I'm a former military policeman, 22 years in the military police, 20 years in the airborne infantry. I think that I have a right to exercise my skill to protect myself and my family. But you got somebody, just because they're a good actor and they're very wealthy, they can acquire a firearm. So I think what the mayor was talking about is that political elite class. And those are the people that he feels will feel less safe, because they know that they've done things to the average person, and we're fed up. So they know why the Second Amendment was written in the Constitution, and they look at it and they say, well, these people are angry because we're tyrants, and justifiably so. So yeah, we want to take away their rights, their ability to defend from us. So I think, in my humble opinion, that's who they're talking about. But maybe it's a Freudian slip, call it what you will, but they're very telling. And I want to say, by the way, I was on with Joe Piscopo, great guy, gets the word out, and very civic-minded and very level-headed. I brought up the same thing about the Wild Wild West and having a plan to suppress the gun violence from the thugs. And as soon as we got into that part of the conversation, we got shut off. So I hope that doesn't happen in your podcast. I don't want to bring bad luck to you, but the powers that be don't want to hear that. But they feel a need to be protected from the common citizen as opposed to the thug, because they have their private security or their publicly paid security. Now, how about no public official has any taxpayer-funded security, and so we provide armed security for our school children, public and private. How about that?
Mm-hmm. And before we drift off to one other decision of the Supreme Court that made the news, we want to touch on what Senator Ron Paul was talking about. He spoke in a privileged speech yesterday about red flag laws being weaponized and used as a tool to harass people with different political views, or ex-spouses, people just, somebody didn't like what they said on Facebook or Twitter or something. Could you do you agree with that? Is it also risky with the new red flag laws, or the red flag laws we have in New York State, where people can just be victimized by people abusing these laws.
Absolutely, because they can be used to harass people. There's no penalty if you report somebody without any facts or circumstance that will cause a reasonable person to believe that they're a threat. The victim has to pay storage and legal fees during the process. None of that's reimbursed, even if they win. And it's an ex parte proceeding, meaning that the victim, in this case, the person who's being alleged to have, a red flag issue, is not present. So you don't get the chance to confront your accuser. It just smacks of a lack of due process. I mean, it's horrendously horrible. And if a couple of people get together and they don't like you and they say, yeah, this guy's a threat, this guy's a problem, you're going before one person, and in New York, it's probably going to be a liberal judge, and they're going to have the ability to take away your rights instead of having a fair hearing before your peers where evidence and facts are presented, and they have to, the government, before the government takes your rights, restricts your movement, confiscates your property, takes your life, they have to prove their case. That's what a defense lawyer is there for. That defense lawyer has to force the government to prove its case. And guess what? If the government can't prove its case, then you walk. But that doesn't happen with red flag laws. People get together and they harass folks, and again, there's no penalty for it. Everything is on the gun owner. This is something the ACLU probably dreamed up, and they're in ecstasy over it, because even when there's a legitimate shooting, somebody's defending themselves, the ACLU will go out there and persecute that person. They'll prosecute a civil trial against them to bankrupt them and intimidate them out of not having a firearm. And red flag laws just facilitate that. They're horrible, and they need to be looked at, and there needs to be due process. You go before a detached and neutral magistrate, you obtain a warrant, and you go through the process of a trial where facts and evidence are presented to a jury, and they make a decision as to whether or not somebody has committed a crime. And you can't. That's the other thing. They have this predictive law that they want to impose. You can't impose penalties on people for crimes you think they may commit. It just doesn't work that way.
They often talk about the shooter in Buffalo, but a lot of people forget that was a case where there are red flag laws that didn't work. The person admitted and in fact posted online how to lie to get out of a red flag warning and still be able to do the heinous act that he wanted to do. So essentially, I guess the Buffalo shooting, which they often use as an excuse to crack down on violence, actually proves that some red flag laws don't work.
Correct. They don't work against the nut jobs. They work against law-abiding citizens who are innocent. And the thing is, this whole thing about it's not the criminal's fault, and whenever you come up with this mental hygiene, they'll use a mental health issue to take away someone's right to possess a firearm, but then they use it as a crutch and excuse. Somebody goes out there and commits the murder, and they don't want to lock him up. Like the subway slasher, the guy had 19 priors. The subway shooter, I believe he had about 19 or more priors, and they exhibited red flag issues and mental health issues. Had they followed the basic common law of the land, these people would have been locked up for their assaults, their batteries, and they would have gone before a jury, and they would have been convicted, and they would have been kept in prison. But no, you have Alvin Bragg and these other liberal Soros DAs that let these people roam the streets. So, you combine that with the red flag laws, and you're only hurting law-abiding citizens.
Well,
but
Frank James.
I got to say this.
Yeah, I'm sorry, Frank James, the shooter in the Brooklyn subway shooting. He was on YouTube. He had 30,000 followers on YouTube and was posting all these videos, talking hate videos of various kinds, and talking about how he intended to shoot people at some point. That he was going to go wild and do this thing, and nobody reported it, even with the red flag laws in place.
See, now, I'll go back to what Joe Piscopo has been saying on the radio. When he had a problem with his refrigerator, he mentioned it on the radio because he also wanted, refrigerated stuff built in America, which we can do right here in Queens. And all of a sudden now he starts getting pop-ups on Google, on all the social media and emails for refrigerator advertisement, which indicates that they track what we do and say. So if they can do that for commercial purposes, why can't they do that to track a guy like this that boldly say, and I've experienced this at work recently, and it scared these liberals, but their response is, what are you going to do to protect us? And I'm sitting there chuckling inside, what are you going to do to protect yourself? But, you know, if the guy goes on social media and he posts death threats or has a manifesto that says he wants to do harm to a certain class of people, I think that causes a reasonable suspicion that should be turned over to law enforcement. From that point on, they should do an investigation, obtain a warrant, and go interview this guy and rule out the credibility of the threat. Or, if they can't, now you got to take action. You got to drag him before a detached and neutral magistrate, and you have to give him due process of law and a trial. But it should be done that way. So we already have the mechanisms and the tools in place. We don't need more of these red flag laws that are going to harm innocent people when they ignore obvious evidence of criminal behavior or the intent to commit a crime. And, you know, I said we shouldn't have predictive or prescriptive laws that, you know, go after what you might do, but a threat has always been illegal. So if a guy openly makes a threat on social media, I'm going to do such and such, that in and of itself is a crime. That's prosecutable. So that's not what I'm talking about when I say the red flag laws are trying to be preemptive, if you will. You know, you don't need to preempt people's rights, but when you have somebody that's committed the crime of basically a credible assault because he's telling you he's going to hurt somebody, then you take action.
You know,
I want to also.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Go ahead, please. Yeah, please.
No, I want to encourage folks to take advantage of this new affirmation of our rights, but to exercise caution. You know, we need to take a wait and see approach as to what the lower court does, and that they're going to drag their feet. But always go through the process of applying for a legal permit in the jurisdiction, even though it's an infringement of your rights. And anybody that's new to firearms, please go to NRA.org and take a basic pistol or rifle course. If you live in this area, I can be found at zip code 11377. But do yourself a favor. If you want to take advantage of your rights, get training and know what you're doing. And please always follow the law, because all we need is one law-abiding citizen to make a mistake, and they're going to be all over it. See, I told you. So let's not give them that excuse when it comes to firearms.
So the other Supreme Court ruling I wanted your opinion on, you know, as a community leader here, of course, and as a parent and as a Catholic, is, you know, the Supreme Court ruled in favor of parents' rights for school choice, and that schools can, you know, and do have a right, if they are religious schools, to engage in religious activities. Because for a time, if, let's say, a student was put into a religious school because the school was the closest to their residence, and the government paid for it, they actually banned everybody else in the school from engaging in religious activities because of another student who happened to be there. And this happened in many instances, in many cases. And many schools were forced to do this because they were afraid of lawsuits. So what do you think of this ruling on, you know, parents' rights and schools' rights, basically, to engage in, you know, sharing the Word of God, for example, or having a Bible class, or you know, school prayer? And we're not talking about in public school now. We're talking about in private schools when someone is sent to a private school.
Well, it's an absolute win for you know, people who choose to practice their faith. I firmly believe in charter schools, vouchers, and homeschooling. It gives the parents a choice. It creates competition, which increases efficiency. You know, teachers are going to be paid for what they're worth. If I want to homeschool and I have to pay somebody to help me supplement that, I'm going to pay them what they're worth. So teachers gain there, parents gain there, children gain there. I don't think it doesn't violate the three-part lemon test at all. You know, there's no government-established religion. But what it does is it prevents them from violating our rights. I mean, as Catholics, we pay taxes like anyone else. So why should we have to be forced to teach things against canon law in order to qualify for government money? And oh, by the way, that would include if they ever get off their duff and pass decent legislation, that would include funding to protect schools from shooters. So if we have armed police officers or security in our public schools, we could do that in parochial schools. They would get the same funding. Now, parents that choose to homeschool, they have the Second Amendment right. But I think it's an absolute win, and we no longer have to have alternative lifestyles shoved down our throats. You pay a lot of money these days for a Catholic education. I'm fortunate enough to be able to send my youngest to Catholic school, and he's benefited tremendously from it. My oldest went through the public school system, and he's a good man. He's doing okay, but it was pure hell because public schools are pure hell. So I think it's a win. I think it's totally constitutional what the court did, and I agree with it. And I think it's time for Catholic schools to start standing up and being Catholic schools. We no longer have to teach the indoctrination of CRT and the drag queen garbage that they're trying to force down our throats in front of our children. We don't have to take that anymore. And it's sad because we're pretty much the only religion that gets bullied that way. The other ones, our Jewish brothers and sisters, they stand up and they say, no, we're not going to take it. They won't do it to Muslims. And, the other folks, they don't have to suffer that injustice, but they target us and they try to force this down our throats. I personally know that in order to qualify for city funding, Catholic schools are forced to do certain things that violate our faith, and that's wrong. So the court got it right again in this case, definitely.
Okay, Marvin, do you have anything else you'd like to add as I wrap things up now on Mike of New York?
No, Mike, once again, thanks for the opportunity to get the word out there to the people. And I'm going to be running again, and they can find me at marvinjeffcoat.net, marvinjeffcoat.net. I need donations, and I need people that are going to be able to collect signatures for the 2023 race. Everything has gotten worse. People are being assaulted and murdered in our district. The economy's gone to pot. And, education, our kids are being indoctrinated. So even with that new court ruling, we need somebody on the local level to put it all together and get the state of government going in the direction of the people, and that's me.
Okay, Marvin, thank you so much.